Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Purple Breakdown. I am your host, Alex, and I'm so excited to be back here on another Tuesday with you all. I hope that you are all enjoying your wonderful Tuesday, enjoying the weather out there, even though it can be a little rainy in some places, and enjoying all the games that happened last night, and a wonderful week. I know I'm having a great week so far, and so excited to be back here on the episode with you and talking more Ravens, because that's what we're here to talk about. The Baltimore Ravens and the best team out there in the NFL. So let's dive in and talk about them. But first and foremost, if you like the content that you're hearing, please remember and consider to subscribe, like, and comment. Your comments get featured in the long form videos here in the first segment of every video, as well as making my day because I get to read your comments and smile and respond with you guys and talk more Ravens football. That's why I want to make this podcast. That's what I want to do. And I always love talking with you guys. So make sure to keep those comments coming. All right, we got a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into it and start with our comments of the day. So, in response to a post I put out, who should the Ravens target at center? AJ, you came out and said Aaron Brewer from Miami. Now, Aaron Brewer is a 20-year-old center out of Miami. He's 6'1", 274 pounds, and actually had a really decent year this past year. He had an 87.4 overall grade, a 91.5 run blocking grade, and a 71.2 pass blocking grade. He allowed 1 sack, but he had 9 penalties against him, which was horrible. So you'd want to see the penalties cleared up. He played 912 offensive snaps this past season. And I mean, you're talking about a guy that could fit well into the Ravens system. He has played on the Titans from 2020 to 2023 and then Dolphins to present, and is on contract for a little bit longer there. But in the past few weeks, there's been circulation around whether or not the Dolphins will trade him away, especially after what they just did with a whole bunch of their other players and scrapping that team and going to try and add extra picks this next year, especially with how valuable that would be. The problem is, as good as a player that he can be and showing what he could do in the Ravens system, especially with his run blocking and helping Derrick Henry get down the field and that running back room improve and continue to excel, it would cost a lot to get him in a trade. And the Dolphins would definitely be looking for valuable draft picks in this next year's upcoming draft. And the Ravens are going to covet those picks a lot. This next year is a very high value draft. There's a lot of good prospects coming out of it. And with how many first round QBs are probably going to get taken, a lot of other skill position players are going to fall into spots that the Ravens might be able to take. So, when looking at it, as good as a boon he could be for the Ravens, and I think he would be a great fit on the Ravens, I don't know if the Ravens are willing to give up what it would take to get him, especially with the draft that they could get this next year. But thank you for the comment, AJ. I really like the idea of Brewer being on the Ravens. I just don't know if the Ravens would be willing to take it with what they would have to give up for him. Now, other comment is David. You said I will be shocked to the extreme if Lamar signs a new contract before the end of the 2026 season. Lamar has not figured out that the earlier you sign, the quicker you get back to the table and get a new higher paying contract. Seems like Lamar is slow to talk contract, and EDC allows Lamar to control the process because EDC is afraid of upsetting Lamar during the process. Lamar is not too bright on contract talks. An agent would have probably made him much richer much earlier, even after paying agent fees. Now, I'm tending more to agree with you on this one, David. And this is actually one of our big talking points of today is Lamar Jackson contract and the news coming out around it, because when looking at it, it's going back to feeling like it was the 2023 season with Lamar Jackson contract extension talks. It's a sore point that people are pointing to as an issue between the Ravens and Lamar and what the future will look like for the Ravens team. And I think a deal will ultimately get done, but the question is, does it happen at the end of the training over the summer, or does it happen before the next season? And the longer you wait on it, the more of a chance that Lamar won't be on the team in the future. And so you'd like to see it get done quicker, but Lamar is controlling the process as of right now, partly because EDC is letting him do it, but partly because he also does have a lot of leverage that we're going to go into and talk about today on what leverage he does have in these contract talks and the control that he has in them. But it's something that needs to get done. And because he doesn't have an agent, to your point, he gets to sort of demand what he wants and not get told an outside opinion other than what EDC and the organization would tell him and say what they think he's worth. But to your point, maybe he would have been better off having a free agent and getting a contract like what Patrick Mahomes got, a long-term contract that lasts for a while and he can make a lot of money off of. And yeah, it could get restructured and help down the line. But we're beside that point now, and we're at the point where we're at with Lamar, and a contract needs to get done, and we got to see how it will get done. And we're going to talk into here first thing what the sort of news is going around that, because it's one of the biggest questions. So let's just dive in and talk to it right now. Is will the Ravens get a new contract done with Lamar? The thought is it needs to get done. Lamar needs to retire as a Raven. He is a Raven, and he's the best quarterback the Ravens have had and one of the best in the league. He's a 2-time MVP, should be a 3-time MVP. And when looking at it, you can't give that up. That is such a pivotal part of the team and how the offense operates and moves the ball down the field, and losing him would be a detriment to the team, and you have to go searching for a new one. And so if the Ravens can't get a long-term contract with him, the question is, would they trade up this next year to try and target a QB to bring in and be a quarterback of the future, or would you rather keep Lamar around long-term? And I would rather keep Lamar around long-term. But when looking at his previous contract, because this situation is so similar to the 2023 situation, and that in 2023, he denied short-term contracts. He did not want those. He wanted a long-term, big guaranteed money, just like what Deshaun Watson got. And what he got was a 5-year, $260 million contract with $185 million guaranteed, which was a record-setting contract and reset the market and made him one of the highest-paid quarterbacks in the league. And the situation just changed again with Dak Prescott getting his massive contract that he just got, where I think he, over 4 years, has $240 million at $60 million a year, with 230 some odd million of that guaranteed, which is insanity. And so now Lamar has another thing to point to and say, look, what I want is that. I want a long-term contract with more money than what Prescott is getting and the guaranteed amount that would be looking at that. And so I would have thought if he's looking above that $60 million mark, he may be looking at 64, 65 million, which puts in that 320 to 325 million over 5 years, because I feel like a 5-year mark would be there. Maybe a 4-year mark is what they would do with him, which would lower it down, but about 64 to 65 million dollars a year. And then guaranteeing the majority of that. So you may say, if you're going on a 5-year contract, you may say $320 million and guaranteeing, 300 million of that, which is an insane amount and would make him the highest paid quarterback in the league. And not only that, it would reset the quarterback market. And I think that's what he's looking for going into this next year. What the Ravens could offer him and him accept right now would be something like that 60 to $65 million a year range, mostly guaranteed contract and long-term and not a short-term contract. And that's what he wants out of it. And why he can demand this is, you got to look, the Ravens have him out through the 2027 season, but he knows that this next year, with the $84 million cap hit that he'll command after this year is done, because they restructured his contract, which opened $40 million next season. So not this one, but the year after, he has an $84 million cap hit. And then once that 2027 season is done, you got to look at it and go, the Ravens don't control him anymore. They can't franchise tag him. They can't trade him without his permission. And he can go into free agency and go do what he wants and demand what he wants. And so the Ravens are put in a pickled situation here, because if Lamar doesn't get what he wants, he can just say, well, I'm done in 2 years anyways, and I'm moving on out, which puts the Ravens in a pickle and puts DaCosta in a pickle, because they need him to stay around long-term if they want to continue to succeed. And the fans also want Lamar to stay around very hard. I don't think many of us would argue against that. And we have a lot of faith in Lamar as a quarterback and going and getting it done. And so I think when looking ahead at this, the Ravens, DaCosta is going to play DaCosta. DaCosta loves to sort of sit and try and get the best deal, and I understand what he's looking at. There's a lot of young talent on the team in the upcoming years that is going to need to get paid. You got to think in a few years. I mean, you got to pay Malachi Starks this next year. You got to pay Zay Flowers. There's so many guys coming out that need longer term contracts. Nate Wiggins won't be in too long, and so you need to save money for them. But if you can't keep Lamar, what happens to that offense and what happens to the future of this team while Lamar is still healthy and can still play to a high level? And so I almost wonder if they're saving the cap space that they have to give Lamar a contract extension like that. But not only give Lamar a contract extension like that, I think expecting the cap space to continue to expand and getting out ahead of this while they can now is most beneficial. Because if Lamar goes off this next year, like a lot of people are predicting, and goes out and the Ravens win a Super Bowl, what Lamar is asking for now will grow even larger. And so I think the Ravens need to get out ahead of this, and they need to do what they should have done with Linderbaum and just say, hey, you know what? Let's get out ahead of this. We're going to give you what you want right now, give you that money. It'll hurt in the short term, but in the long term, we got to understand that the league cap space will continue to expand. And as that expands, we now have you under long-term contract, and that will open up and inflate that market and inflate it a little bit so that we have more space to work with to give other players money. And especially with at the rate that the NFL is expanding right now, you can expect that going into the future, that there will be more cap space to work with and allow you to pay some of those other players. And so that's my take on it, that they need to get this done. They need to work on it now, that they need to get ahead of this and say, hey, you know what? Like, look at this. Let's get ahead of it. Let's get ahead of the curveball. Don't let it happen with what happened with Linderbaum. Give him the long-term contract. Give him the money that he wants, be it a 4 or 5 year, $60+ million a year. I'm guessing more 64, 65 million a year, and mostly guaranteed. Just give it over. Understand that we're at that point, get out ahead of it, and that you can't get a Patrick Mahomes style contract anymore with him at his age, where you could restructure for so far down the line. You're not looking at possibly giving him another 7 years. 5 years would be about the limit I would be wanting to give him at this moment, especially if you got to think when he gets to the end of that 5 years and his age he'll be at and how he plays and runs and the injuries that he has had over the past few years. If that expedites by the end of that contract, you're wanting to move on somewhere new. And it's because lifespans in the NFL are short. They're not long. You can't expect every single player to play out to 37, 38 years old, going closer to 40. You got to expect that at some point there is a fall off like that, and especially with how Lamar plays. And I'm not saying that he's bad. I'm saying that he plays aggressively. He likes to run, and injuries can catch up just like they've done with Joe Burrow and other quarterbacks throughout the league. And age will just make that more difficult. So I think right now, get out ahead of it, get the 5-year contract, give him the money, play out those full 5 years, go win a Super Bowl or two right now with Lamar as you can, get him to retire a Raven and see where he's at in a few years, and debate then whether or not you want to extend that contract out even further. But that's the news on Lamar. And a lot of this is coming from actually a report that came out from La Cornforna is his name, I believe it is. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering your last name, sir. But he was essentially talking about how Lamar has the Ravens in a little bit of a bind right now with that, and is controlling some of the contract talks and how it's going. And right now, there doesn't seem to be much progress being made on it, despite what was being said earlier in the season. And so, credit to you, sir, for giving out some of this information. But I'm expecting that the Ravens, like David said, that they're going to take their time on this, and it may not happen to the end of the season, even though I would like it to be done before the season begins, and to just get out ahead of this and take the swing on it now. And so you're out ahead of the curveball, because that's one problem that the Ravens seem to always have, is not getting ahead on some of this stuff, and that tends to bite them later on. And so they need to take this swing now and get out ahead of it right now. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some other news that is coming out today. And that is that the Sharp Football Analyst has projected the Ravens to have the 6th easiest schedule this next season, which is good news for the Ravens. It allows us to have more of a higher chance to get into the playoffs, especially with considering the fact that the Steelers are supposed to have one of the most hardest schedules in it. And so you got to really expect it to be the Bengals and the Ravens, and it allows us a higher chance of, if not only taking the division, but also going out there. And if you can't win the division, you're getting a wild card spot and you're still getting in there. And you got to remember this next season, the games are at home. We have the Bengals, Browns, Steelers, Jags, Titans, Saints, Bucks, and Chargers. And away is the Bengals, Browns, Steelers, Falcons, Colts, Texans, Panthers, Bills, and then the Cowboys down in Brazil at Rio Grande. So that is the schedule that we will have going out, and what the who will be playing. There's no set schedule so far, besides knowing that we're playing the Cowboys in week 3 down in Brazil. That is the only one we really know of. All the others, we just know whether they're home or away and who the opponent is. We don't know the exact date yet. That'll be coming out soon. But the Ravens should have possibly a little bit of an easier schedule to go out there and win a few more games and get a higher seed going into the playoffs, which would be really beneficial. The Ravens also, on this note, have been ranked in the new power rankings by ESPN at rank 10 now. We moved up 4 spots in that ranking. And again, this is really early to be doing power rankings, but it's showing that there's confidence in the Ravens organization, that they really addressed some of the issues that were there during this offseason and got players in. They said that they identified the biggest improvement for the Ravens that ESPN analysts did is at edge with Trey Hendrickson and Zion Young. And I think that's a very true statement, that it's going to let the Ravens get after the quarterback a lot more, and having those 2 players on there will be really beneficial and solving that issue. I also point towards guard with John Simpson and Vega Ioane. I think those 2 together solve those guard position a lot more, and there's still holes to be filled, but the Ravens have made improvement to what they needed to do. And expect that the talent that's getting brought in on D-line to really help elevate the O-line, especially with the reps that they can get in practice, that you're facing a more challenging defense, and especially more challenging defensive line, that will help you practice more towards those games where you're going to be facing other challenging defenses, and allowing that O-line to take a step forward and produce more. All right. Final thing is, are other groups and teams mimicking the Ravens draft strategy? And this is an article I actually read that came out of the Steelers that I found interesting. Is, are other teams mimicking what the Ravens do? And I think to an extent, yes. And it's what the Eagles and Ravens do in drafting best available and going off of that. And I know it angered DeCosta in this past draft, where he went out and actually talked on the lounge about it and saying, hey, like, other teams are following more what we do, and it's taking some of the players we really want away. And that really specifically looking at center with Slaughter and Jones, that those 2 were 2 big centers that the Ravens really wanted and didn't end up getting either of them, even though they thought they would be there in the 3rd round. And it's like, look, I think, one, yes, other teams are recognizing the success that the Eagles, the Seahawks, and the Ravens have had in draft pickups and bringing in players like that and mimicking what those teams do in drafting best available. But you also got to look at what this past draft class was. There was a very elite group at the top, and then after that, it sort of dipped off before coming back up in the later rounds. And so you wanted to get the talent that you could at the highest you could get it. And at one point or another, you can't blame other teams for taking talent that they saw and needed and taking that above when you had them available and didn't take them. And that's what happened with the Ravens. And so I don't think DeCosta should be too angry about that. I expect this to change this next year, where there's so many quarterbacks being drafted in the 1st round that it allows talent to slip down, and you'll be seeing a lot more variation in that next year, and not so much following by what consensus would be. So that is all the news that I have for today. I know it's been a little bit of a shorter episode, but I want to thank you all so much for stopping by and joining in, and hope that you enjoyed the conversations. If you learned something and really liked what you heard, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Doing the same on Spotify, following, reviewing, and leaving a comment. Your comments make my day. I get to read them. I get to respond with you guys. I get to talk Ravens, as well as your comments get featured here in the long form videos. I want to thank you all so much for stopping by and joining in, and I can't wait to talk to you all next time. Have a great rest of your day.